Hey there, this is Brent with just a quick little announcement or thought, I guess we can say, before we get into the main part of this episode. And that is, this is also a YouTube video. And there are a few things as we especially get into the section where I say I'm in the studio at my office up at the school and this is about 45 minutes in, somewhere in there. And it can seem a little bit like you get a little bit lost because I'm showing you so many things. So I just wanted to give you that heads up. So if it feels like, oh, I wish I were able to see this, check out those show notes. I've got the link to the YouTube video and you'd be able to hop on over to YouTube to see this. But otherwise, I'm so glad you're here. Thanks so much. Let's get on into the episode and learn all about there is to learn with this whole idea of let there be light and the image that this is all about. All right, here we go. Hello and welcome back to the Great Outdoors Photography Podcast. This is episode 164, and I'm talking about my January 2024 print release, and I've titled it, Let There Be Light. So Let There Be Light. This is a beautiful photograph that is all about color. That's all there is. That's all we can talk about. That's all we can say about it. It is just purely oodles and oodles bounding with color. It makes me happy, I guess, when I look at it. It's the print of the month for January 2024. I've been doing these this is now my 7th release of these prints, and these items are 13 by 19 prints. It's actually 11 by 17 on a 13 by 19 sheet of paper. So you have that 1-inch border. And I've been doing these since, well, I guess technically since about August or so, but I kind of backtracked all the way till July when I made the initial announcement of when they were released. But so from July through now, we've got these coming out once a month. And if you want to be the first to know about it, right there on the first of the month, you get an email with all of these details and you can read about it. You can take a look at it and you can have that. You'd be on the cusp of everything as it relates to seeing the new image, seeing the new information that comes out. And of course, we're looking to just share about the image, tell the story behind the image, but also to help understand what is it about the image that makes it work? Why do I like the image and why do I think it makes it work? Having a conversation like this, I think, helps us all to really, I think, formulate ideas and formulate understandings for what we are about in our photography, for what we're doing and how it manifests itself, the creativity manifests itself for us in our photography. So let's take a dive into this backstory here, this background understanding of what it is we're dealing with when we're talking about this image that I've titled, Let There Be Light. It goes back to September of 2016. I was on a sabbatical for my job. I'm a teacher, and every so often we're awarded or allowed, or whatever you want to call it, we're afforded, I should say, the opportunity to take a sabbatical. And I've been teaching for 17 years, almost now, just shy of 17 years, and I've only had 2 sabbaticals. I have plans for another one. I'd like to pull it together and get another one going, but with some other items that are going on that I'm going to share later in this episode, things are just, may not be able to schedule that right away, plan for that right away, because it's a huge process I have to go through to get it approved. But I went on sabbatical, and in this time, in 2016, I actually took my sabbatical during the summer, which almost seems, pointless because we have our summers off. Why would I do something, to keep me doing work? Because at my university, when we take a sabbatical, we have to do a project or do some type of research or some type of something that advances our teaching. It totally makes sense. I get that. When you have the release of your duties, yet you still receive your paycheck, there's got to be something else in there. There's got to be something that is going to be an investment or a good reason for why this investment is being made in someone. And I think it makes a lot of sense to have that requirement or have that desire. So I did a project called Design in Northern Europe. And with this project, I was looking at two distinct ideals of design, the design, can I say industry, I guess, that was on either side of World War II, most notably the Bauhaus School of Design and then Polish poster design. So I went to Germany and Poland. Well, I landed in Berlin and then immediately took the rental car and drove to Prague. That was, what was it, about 3 hour, 4 hour drive, something like that. But it was at night. I was tired from all the jet lag, and I just wanted to get to our Airbnb. My father had joined me, and so I was driving though, and Google Maps took us on a strange route. I think there was construction though, and so we were taken on this route that just, it was so weird, so windy in one place. So anyway, it was really windy, and I could see these old buildings. I could tell we were going through a town. I wasn't on the highway. I was going through these old towns, and it was raining, like I said, and I was just really tired. And I was just like, I'm sure this is really awesome, but I don't want to do this right now. And I was just trying to get through it. But I used Prague in my planning. I'm sitting here in my office and I'm planning, what am I going to do for my sabbatical? How is this going to work out? How is this going to go? And I've got 3 weeks in Europe, because the end of the journey I actually used as my conference, because we're also supported for going to a conference every other year. And so I was like, hey, I want to go to a conference. And I was going to go to Photokina, which was awesome as well. So I had 3 weeks in Europe, and I was like, I'll just use Prague to get over jet lag. I almost regret doing that, because Prague is so awesome. I should have used some backwater place. I don't know that exists, but anyway, Prague is just really awesome. So, but I use it to, quote, get over jet lag. So my production, my traveling, my walking, my hiking, whatever, I wasn't at full speed. I wasn't at my full energy, but that's all right. It was still awesome and still very productive. One of the places we went to was the Prague Castle, and in particular with this photograph, the Royal Gardens. Now, if you're watching here on the YouTube channel, you're able to see everything that's going on with some of these images coming up. Right now, I've got the mapping function in Lightroom, because at the time I shot this image, I believe I was shooting the 6D Mark II, and that had a one of the beautiful things about that camera, or no, it was a 6D. I'm sorry, it was the first 6D, not the Mark II. One of the beautiful things about that camera was that it had a built-in GPS, and my 5D Mark IV also had the built-in GPS. I love that idea. So the images are getting geotagged just immediately as they're being shot. Well, here we are. We see the Vltava River curving, and then a little bit north and a little bit west of that is Prague Castle, and then just up the hill from that is the Royal Gardens. And was walking along, saw these flowers, and was like, hey, that's really cool. The color, it was just, boom, it was right there. It was awesome. And I was kind of going kind of fast, though. It's so weird how one's memory will, I don't know if I want to say fade, but what sticks out to you over the years? What is held in your memory over the years? I just remember it being very casual. My approach, I saw there was a bicycle next to a brick wall. There were some of these other items that I was focusing on where we're looking at different vines and different leaves and other things like that. But then this bush, this collection of these flowers, these leaves, these colorful leaves and flowers were just punching right there. And initially, though, the light was really harsh. I was like, oh, I don't like this. But I found another cluster that was in the shade, and it was working great. But I just remember instantly thinking, this isn't very exciting. These images that I'm making are really dull, really boring. I mean, yeah, I can see the flowers. I can see the sense and get the sense of them, but it's boring. It's just so boring to look at. And so I was just thinking, It's about the color. And that's what drew me in. And so that's what I need to be focusing on. And so by doing that, what I did is turned off the autofocus and switched that lens, the focus ring on that lens, all the way out. And it just threw this stuff way out of focus. And I was like, bingo, there we go. We've got it. So in totality, in this, as I look at the timestamps going from one image to the next, from this, what was happening here. Now, it's possible I've deleted some images and I don't have those still to judge. So I suppose there's that whole idea. But in the totality of the timestamp, we're looking at less than 5 minutes from when I first started shooting this subject to when I ended shooting, and I just continued on the way. So it happened quickly. It happened without too much thought, I guess I have to admit, going into it. And then when I got home, that's when I was just like, oh yeah, there's something here. I don't know exactly what. I remember thinking too, I don't know exactly how I'm going to use this. Do I want to take a texture of some sort and overlay it? Do I want to put some text on it? Do I want to, how am I going to, is it just going to be a background for something? I don't know. But I knew I needed to keep it. Those punchy colors, those vibrating waves from one hue to the next. It was just very exciting to me. And I was just like, yes, I'm definitely keeping it. So I kept it. And it wasn't until at the time of this recording now in early January of 2024, it wasn't until just about a month ago, maybe 2 months ago at the most, where I'm starting to think about incorporating it as one of the upcoming prints of the month, that I started really thinking about this image. I was like, this would be perfect for that. It's abstract enough to have a broad appeal, but it's also punchy and colorful enough to be exciting and to kind of sort of be a conversation starter. That's what I'm hoping will happen with these prints of the month, that they end up hopefully just being some kind of conversation starter. And at least it's something that you can look at and you can find some kind of peace, some kind of understanding, I guess, for how it satisfies your imagination and what it can be and what it is for you. So let's take a look here for a little bit. And we're going to be thinking about this whole idea of the design and composition elements of the image. And like I mentioned, I was pulled in by the colors when I'm shooting, walking along, pulled in by those colors. That's all there is to it. And I think pretty much there's not much else as it relates to the standard ideas of design principles. Certainly we can think about the contrasting colors, sort of. Mostly these are analogous colors though, which are not known to be contrasting. But we do have some deep reds, a little bit of pink, significant amounts of yellow, tiny amount of green. And all of these are working together to just punch forward with what they got. But when I look at other design principles, there's just not much else there. Whether you're thinking hierarchy or texture, framing elements, the Gestalt principle, Gestalt theory, there's just not much else there. And it is purely a study, a purely enjoyment of color for color's sake. And that's all there is to it, I think. And I'm happy for it. I'm glad for it. And this is why I'm just thrilled to have this kind of, I guess, this view on photography that says, I don't need to satisfy this pre-existing laundry list. I'm going to take what's there and I'm going to do what I can to create something that is interesting. We want to have something that's interesting in our photography, but I'm going to create something that's interesting by just simply relying upon what's there and how I'm reacting to it. And then boom, we have it. And it just, it just works. Yay. All right. Let's take a look into Lightroom and see exactly what did happen here when it comes to the post-production items. Okay, so here we are in Lightroom's Develop module, and we can see there's just a little bit, well, not even a little bit, there's nothing changed in the white balance. It's just listed as shot. So I didn't change anything there. And then as we come down the exposure and things like that, Nothing there either. What's going on? There's nothing changed in this image. How can that be? This just feels so weird. And we can verify I'm on the CR2. Now, this is a virtual copy, but it is still the CR2. This is not like there's something I went and manipulated further in Photoshop or something like that. This is basically how it came out. Now, here's the thing though. I did take my texture to a -61 and the clarity to -71. This enhances the softness appeal and a little bit. Let's see what happens when I modify that clarity. I will double click that and I'll go back to 0. You can see there's a little bit of contrast coming back in. Those smooth values just did not come into what I want them to be. Nothing on the dehaze. I virtually never do anything on dehaze. Vibrance, but then saturation. Vibrance was 0, saturation is +56. So I'm adding some punch to those colors to make them really come forward, to make them really come out. So as it relates to how the camera initially interpreted, we can see here, this is at 5950 on the temperature. It's leaning more towards the cool side of things. And so the camera already initially interpreted that properly and saying, we're in the shade kind of an idea. So they got the color pretty much spot on. As we go down here and look at the tone curve, there's nothing there. There's nothing in the color mixer, nothing in the color grading. We do have something in the detail area. This is where I have talked about a lot in my overall ideas of sharpening and things like that. Now, this one, I took it all the way to 0 on that sharpening setting. Usually I leave it at 25. But this one, I was just like, no, I don't want anything at all coming in a sharpening sense. This was ISO 800, so that I'm possibly going to have, especially if I'm on the 6D, I'm going to have some potential noise coming through. So I really wanted to slam that sharpening all the way to 0, so nothing is coming in from Lightroom's influence anyway. And then on my lens corrections, we've got just the standard profile lens correction items. And then on the calibration, this is, let's see, it has it highlighted here. It says it's version 5. I probably should go ahead and update this to version 6. Let's see what happens with that, if there's any significant difference. There's a tiniest of differences, but there's no significant difference there. And also when we come up here, I kind of sidetracked this. I bypassed this. The profile Adobe landscape. So with the profile, now the landscape is a bit of a saturated profile. The standard one will be, I think, Adobe Color. This is how it's going to look, how it initially will interpret the image. But I do like to usually put my things on Adobe Landscape. So that's a default setting for me. And that's what's helping initially to give some of that punchiness to the overall saturation. By doing Adobe Landscape, I don't usually have to go very high on my saturation slider. But this one is at 56, and that's the primary one that's really, that and clarity, doing the negative on clarity and negative on texture. Those are the items that are really helping this image to sing and to be what it is. And that's just pretty exciting to have this just come so, I don't know if I call it a pure image or anything like that, but as we can see, I don't have any masks being used. I only have a crop to bring it into that 11:17 aspect ratio for the prints of the month that I'm doing. And other than that, that's it. Very simple on this one. Very simple approach to the overall processing. It's coming through largely directly as it was envisioned and recorded in camera in the raw file, with just those few differences, of course, coming through. Now, I say a few differences. They are punched pretty strongly, though, so we can move them forward, advance them forward, and get them really moving in the direction that we're wanting them to move. All right, let's now go ahead and get this thing printed. This thing is, I've got the paper already loaded, and I'm going to go on the Canson Infinity paper like I often do for these items. So let's activate our print module here, and we have it already set to go. And on this one, I've already done a nozzle check, so I know there's nothing clogged on the printer. And so we're going to do our print resolution at 240. we're going to run our color management and select the proper profile. And then we're going to do the relative intent or rendering intent. It preserves color accuracy, but clips those out of gamut colors. I'm totally okay with that. I would much rather the color accuracy be preserved. And that way, when I see the print and I compare it to the screen, I have a better chance of them actually looking similar. Whereas if I go perceptual, it says it preserves out of gamut detail, but it may change the in-gamut colors. And so because the way it, sometimes you got to do this, don't get me wrong, but because of the way it behaves, personally, I prefer to try the relative first, because it's something that's a little more of an easier guarantee that what's on screen is going to match the print, and I should say vice versa. I'm still going to say the print is going to be the master rendering, as it were, but when it comes to the matching, I still like to do what I can to get them to match as best as possible. And of course, usually it works beautifully. All right, so let's hit this printer button here. We're going to set up a few parameters and make sure we're all good to go here. So of course, we're going to the Canon printer. Going to go to my print options, quality and media, paper plus semi-gloss. That's what Kansan Infinity suggests for this paper. And it is coming out of the rear tray, and we want print to quality to be high. So we're pretty good. Then we hit print, and then we just wait for a few moments for it to prepare the job, for it to spool and come on out. And so we will pick it up when this thing is done. Actually, while that thing's cranking away, I decided I would continue on because I've got a little more to show you on this one. Because in addition to the one print that I did with just the straight up photo, I made another one. And I put a Bible text on there. It says, "And God said, let there be light." Now, this one's going to be a little bit different. This one's going to be a little bit more special in that I'm going to print it on the canvas. So this is live, L-Y-V-E, live canvas from Breathing Color. They're out of Austin, Texas. And I'm going to print this one now. Once the paper one is done, I'm going to print it also tonight. But the special thing about this one is I'm going to do a clear coat, hand-painted clear coat protective layer on it. Now, that's only going to be for the canvas. And what the special thing about that is that clear coat will leave a little bit of those natural brush marks behind. And so it kind of sort of in a way feels like a painting. So let's go ahead and take a look at what I did in Photoshop, or at least what I have here in Lightroom about it. So it's just another file that I went into Photoshop and actually typeset this item in Photoshop and then brought it back into Lightroom. And now I'm using Lightroom to print it. So this is a TIFF that we're dealing with, but of course, nothing else is being changed. Lightroom did all the color controls, sent it to Photoshop, saved it out as a ProPhoto RGB color space TIFF, and brought it back into Lightroom with the typography on it. And now all I have to do is change the profile. So I've got my standard profile here for the Barita Photographique. And now I need to go up here to the BC Live. And let's see, the 9900 is my Epson. And so this one is going to be, here it is, Pixma Pro 10, Live Pixma Pro 10. That's what I'm looking for. Sorry, this other one is for my printer at work. So I've got so many here. And of course, my Optica one, so on and so forth. All right, so the Pixma Pro 10 Live right there. That's the one I want. And then I can just hit this printer button again, double check a few settings here. Now, this is where actually I need to go and see what media specifically they recommend for this, because that's something I have to admit I am not sure on. So let's go take a look and see what we're looking at there. So I've plugged in, I've got the Canon Pixma Pro 10. And so as we come down here under the live canvas, media type, they just say select canvas. All right. So let's take a look and see what we can do there with our settings in Lightroom. So back in the print dialog box here now in Lightroom, I'm going to go here to printer options, quality and media. And we're looking probably at fine art papers. Look, there's one that simply says canvas. That's all we need. And it wants it to be in the manual feed. This is where I'm going to have some problems because I hate doing the manual feed on this printer. And I think I've dealt with this in the past. And what I've done was I selected other fine art paper. So this is where I'm going to be cheating a little bit. I fully admit that. The biggest reason I don't like doing the manual feed is because I don't have enough space on this table to access the manual feed, which is behind on the very, very back. So I'm going to select other fine art paper 1, and we're going to see if I can then select rear tray, which I can. So yes, I'm cheating a little bit. Forgive me. And let's get this loaded as soon as this paper copy is done, and we'll get this printed. That color is looking magnificent, by the way. It's amazing. All right, there it is. That is an absolutely gorgeous print. Loving it. All right. Let's hit the print button now on this canvas, and we'll see that here in a few minutes as well. All right, the print dialog box is giving me a little bit of an error. It's saying support code 88, media type and size are not set correctly. Stop printing, change the settings and print again. With the media type you selected, you need to set the paper size to 1 for art paper with margins. Okay, so what that means here, let me cancel this first. And I need to come into here to my page setup. And I need to come in and take this one and do this with where it says the margin of 30. And let's do that. Now you'll see how it chopped it in a little bit there. This is where I'm really disliking the way that Canon does these things. And I probably should print this on my Epson because my Epson doesn't have this problem. So I'm tempted to go ahead and just print it on the Epson and just say fully with it on this because I need those 30 millimeter margins to go on this type of media, on this type of printer and all that stuff. So let's go ahead and change this back. Let's see if I can fake it some more here because I'd rather fake it some more, but now I need to set this back to 1 inch. And by faking it some more, what I'm talking about is taking it off of a media type that requires the margin to be set at 30 millimeters. So, or is it? Yeah, 30 millimeters. So let's see here. If I were to do Photo Paper Pro Premium Matte, see, that doesn't give me the option to do rear tray. Fine Art Museum Etching does not give me the option to do rear tray. So none of these are going to work. And so basically what I have to do, I can do rear tray here, but that's still going to want the setting of 30 millimeter margins. So I guess I have a little bit of a conundrum. Do I just go ahead and chop that off a little bit and get it out for expediency's sake, or do I put it over on my Epson and get it going on the Epson? I think what I'm going to do, because I'm a stickler for quality and a stickler for getting things done right, as it were, i.e., I just can't live with that extra crop. Even though it's 0.18 inches on each side, I can't really live with that crop. So when it comes to printing canvas, I have to go on the Epson. And so I'm going to do that after all this is said and done, and I'll do it not part of the recording. But what you are going to see here in just a few minutes, you're going to see me painting that clear coat onto the surface there. I'm going to take this up to my office at the school where I've set up myself a little bit of a nook in my office with an easel and all that stuff. And so we're going to actually paint it on there so you can see what that's all about. I'll walk you through all of those things, and then we'll pick it back up here in the studio and wrap things up with everything. Okay, I think I'm all set up now. Welcome to I'm going to call it the studio in my office. This is the office up at the school, and I've got the canvas print that I'm going to be putting the clear coat on there. But before I get to that, what I noticed in the printing last night, when I printed, I talked about the idea of the differences in the rendering intents. You have perceptual and you have relative, and I talked about how I usually like to go with relative. Well, I have these two prints here. This one's perceptual, this one is relative. They are both off the Canon, so the exact same file, the exact same printer, and the exact same paper. The only thing that is different is using a different rendering intent. And I wanted to show you an example, I guess, of something that is the reason why we have these different rendering intents. As I look at these two images, and now I'm going to show you here from the little camera, and it might be a little difficult just because of color compression and whatnot through the video and whatever. It might be a little difficult to discern the differences in color. And remember, the perceptual will alter in gamut colors. So those colors that are the same, whether you see it on screen, whether it's in the same image file, I guess the screen is still irrelevant because we're going directly from the image file to the print, and the screen as it relates to what's in gamut or not in gamut is irrelevant with what I'm looking at here. So when I go from image to print, it will keep those same colors that are in gamut. It will leave them untouched if we go with a relative. If we go with a perceptual, it will take those colors that are out of gamut and compress everything in between and push them down like a spring so that they become in gamut colors. And then everything else is pushed as well. So I am seeing a little shift, primarily in the yellows here, and then over here in the yellow here, I see a very subtle shift in what those yellows are. This is slightly brighter. This comes across to me as slightly more green. So what that tells me is that in this area with the yellow, there is something here that is a little bit out of gamut as it relates to what the printer can do. Now, the thing that really got me to notice it, that really got me to say, oh, I think I really need to shift my thinking on this particular print anyway, and that is this section down here. Right in here, in this little pinkish area, it's mostly red, but it's largely pink. But anyway, right in here, there's a little sensation where it feels like the image is a little bit posterized. That is, the edges are unnatural. They're a little bit, they feel clipped off, or I don't know how best else to describe it. Posterized, if you don't know what that means, it's an idea of where the colors are stepped across and rather than a smooth transition. And that would make a lot of sense given that this is relative color intent and rendering intent, I should say. And what that does is it takes those colors that are out of gamut and it just chops them off and forces them to come down to an in gamut, leaving everything else untouched. So that's what we're seeing here. And then as I come over here to this one, it's just a bit smoother. the transitions and everything are just a bit smoother. And that was the thing that tipped me off on this print last night when I looked at it in grave detail, got really close in and looked at it in grave detail. I noticed I had this little issue going on where it just didn't seem, the color just for some reason just didn't seem to be treated properly. It just, I don't know, it felt a little weird. And then what's the same thing is happening up here in this area with how those deep reds are behaving and the harder edges that come in versus when we come into this print over here, that is super smooth. I love how smooth and how just beautifully it is just exactly what I'm wanting. So in the end, what do? Do I go with the perceptual and I suffer from these subtle color changes, or do I go with the relative and I just deal with these harder edges? Well, in this image, I'm definitely going with perceptual. Now, this certainly is a note I need to make sure I put in Lightroom, so when I print these again, I make sure I get the perceptual going so that I can have those smooth tonal values. Now, another solution I could do for this, I could bring these into Photoshop and I could put them into Adobe RGB color space, and that's a much smaller color space than even my printer can accommodate. And when I make that transition, of course, I'll have some things that probably will look like this and what's going on here with how these colors are just being chopped off. But then I'd be able to push and manipulate those colors back around, or really just use a blur filter to put some dithering in here and just use a blur filter to make that work. I could go that route, and then I would be able to have this exact color, or at least something very near that exact color, coming through. But in this area, then I would have that dithering effect happening with the filter that I put in Photoshop. Because I can dither all I want, I can filter and do whatever else I want in Lightroom. I'm still working in the ProPhoto color space in Lightroom, and then when it comes out, it's after the develop module, it's after that where I'm getting this change. So I just wanted to highlight that for us. It's much better in the perceptual as it relates to this image. Usually I cannot see this type of thing happening in my images when I'm using relative. And this image here for sure, spot on perfect to what I saw on screen. This image, ever so slightly different. I would say it's probably 2% different in the overall color differences. To me, that's super close anyway, and I would call that still acceptable. The changes are acceptable, but it is there, it is noticeable, and it's just something to make sure we're aware of. Okay, now let's get to putting a nice coat on this image here, on this where we have the canvas. I'm going to dump this little camera now, and we're going to take over with putting the clear coat on that print there. So let me just transition super quick. All right, so what we have here is the Liquitex Professional Acrylic Mediums Matte Gel. I went specifically with the matte gel because I didn't want something, when I'm doing canvas type items, I don't want something that is just going to have that shiny, sparkly effect kind of a thing going on. I just want the image to radiate, the canvas to have its thing going on, whatever it can do for it. And to me, if it were to just be really shiny and reflective, that would ruin the experience for me. This is a matte material, and so I had to switch over to the matte blacks to print this item. I also did this, as you'll recall, I switched over to the Epson to get this print made, but also I did this with the perceptual rendering intent as well. So I would have those smoother transitions in these color areas, and it comes out just perfect as I compare it to the one from the Canon. Yeah, there's extremely subtle differences because one's an Epson, one's a Canon, but otherwise they're identical. I have a choice to make now on what brush I'm going to use. Do I want to go with a larger brush or a smaller brush? And I think I'm going to start off with a larger brush right now. And when I do this, really the other choice I need to make is just how thick do I want to make it? Do I want to make it so it's nice and thin and it's just a little bit of a coat that goes over it? Or do I want to make it really thick and really make these bristle stroke marks just really come together and really, they're noticeable, kind of an idea. So that's what I'm going to experiment with a little bit. Now, I have done this plenty on some other pictures, like a portrait for a friend of mine, of his daughter. I did one, and then I've done it on multiple other images where landscape or whatever the case is. But on this image, what I'm thinking, I want to do something really subtle. I don't want those brush marks to be super just goopy and present and all that other good stuff. So just going to take just start it and just start painting. Now it almost looks like Elmer's glue. It's certainly thicker than glue. You could water this down if you wanted to, and it will dry clear, but I'm going to go ahead and give it a try. The thing with it being this thick is that it will dry fairly quickly once it's on canvas. So I'm going to start kind of down here. And by kind of doing this path, this technique that I'm using, I'm getting it to be really thinned out, and I can see just a little bit of the white left behind. Now I want to be thinking too about the angle of my brush stroke, and as I'm working on this, it will dry, and if I try and come back to it and kind of fix it, well, that's not going to work so much. So I've got a little bit of time to work with it. My biggest thing is I don't want the angles of my brush strokes to go against the nature of what's happening with the print. Now let's move the camera a little bit so we can get a little closer in and you can see precisely what's happening on the canvas. All right, we're a little closer now and you can't see me, but here comes my hand and here we go. Being right-handed, I guess it's going to potentially block it a little bit. So I'll start here in that big color concentrated area and then I'll just radiate out. And I've decided also with the text here, I'm not going to try and do anything special with the text as it relates to the texture that I'm delivering. I'm just going to be paying attention to the shapes and the forms of the orbs of color that are happening here. So if I get it too thick and then I leave it alone for a while, of course, that starts to dry, and then I've got a decision already made for me, even though I may not have wanted to make that decision. So I just need to make sure I come back and I don't spread myself too far out there. All right, let's flip the brush over because I got a lot of material on the other side there. Another thing that can happen that I've noticed I can accidentally do is I can leave an area too thin, and effectively what it starts to look like when it's dried, it just looks like I didn't put anything on it at all, and that can be kind of ugly. That can be kind of bad. And also as I'm going across, I can see that the texture of the canvas can grab some details and leave little divots behind. I'll try and get a nice close-in shot so you can really see what that's all about. So if I just do something like this, see no problem here. But as I get thinner and thinner, here I start to have a little problem where the texture of the canvas, the top portions of it, as it were, picks up some of the gel medium. There we go. That right there, that's what I want to stay away from if at all possible. That's going to create, to me anyway, that's going to create an ugly texture. Now it will dry clear and you'll barely see it, but the texture is just going to be there. And it's easier for that to happen as the material dries, and I then go back over previously painted on areas. Now what might be even easier to do on this is just to get a massive brush and just do it quickly. But then your brush strokes are just huge. In these kind of areas here where I have those distinct lines, I could leave them if I was interested in having that kind of texture come through, but I'm not interested in having that much of a texture come through. I want it to be really subtle. I want this image to still be about the light. I don't want your eye, when you're looking at it, if you were to buy this to hang on your wall, I don't want you to be looking at it and be like, oh, aren't those textures just lovely? Oh, that's right, this image is about color. Yeah, we'll see the texture, of course, but I don't want it to be a primary element that you're caught with. All right, so that does it for this image, for this particular item. I just have to let it dry, and I will just do that. We'll leave everything set up so we can analyze it once it is dry, and then we'll just maybe touch it up if we need to touch it up. But I did have a little bit of trouble right here in the center where it started to dry, and then I kind of went over it again, and it started giving that unwanted texture once again. I think I got it smooth enough. It's a little built up, a little bit thicker, but I think it's going to be okay. Proof will be in the pudding when it dries. Of course, we can always do another coat. It's just it will keep building and building and building, and that's not, I don't think, what I want to do. And you'll notice too, I didn't really care about being really detailed on the edges here. That's one thing I like about this inch border there, is I can just paint off the edge of the image and not really worry about it. The ideal would be if it were framed, it will be matted to that area, to the image area. But it's just time now, letting it dry, and then we'll take a look. All right, it's been about 2 hours since I finished doing the application of the clear coat, and boy howdy, it is really subtle. I was going for a very subtle approach on the brush strokes, and it's almost like it really has just almost absorbed into the canvas, but it is so subtle. But the neat thing too about it is that the matte surface, the matte quality of the material, I'm gesturing down here because I put it down there on that thing. But the matte quality is really, it's just so flat. I think that's really good. I really appreciate that, which helps to hide the fact that we have the brush strokes anyway. I have to look really super close because I went so purposefully in trying to smooth out everything. I have to look really close in order to actually see the brush strokes. So I guess that's good to know, because I could go a little more robust, leave a little more juice on the canvas, as it were, and it would still be okay. It would still not detract from the overall quality of the photograph. In the end, do I like it with it on there versus not on there? I definitely do. I appreciate it very much. As I look here in this detail right up in here, I can see how there's a little bit of the fabric, the canvas type of weave is still very evident, but then when I go over and I see the brush on item, it fills in some of those divots, some of those textural items, and it totally smooths it out without totally destroying it. So it makes it a little more subtle of a canvas feel. So if you like something that is, I want it to really feel like a massive amount of canvas or whatever, you want that texture really coming through, well, then you're going to want to basically just not do this at all and allow the canvas to come through naturally. But if you don't mind it filling in a few of those gaps, this is going to be the process for you. So as this is an acrylic medium, it is intended, the whole point is it's intended to be mixed with paints and things like that. And I'm just painting it on directly. I'm using it as a paint itself. So what I'm dealing with here, is it a UV protection and things like that? Well, this actually doesn't really say whether or not it's specifically UV. It does say it extends color, but I know that's about dealing with the actual paints. Like these things here. And so you can mix it with the paint to extend that paint a little bit. But this is also, my point here is to say, I'm literally adding a layer of paint. I'm adding something that will be a protective barrier. It's going to protect from moisture. It's going to protect from scuffs and things like that. And it effectively is an actual paint, a clear paint in this case, that is being applied to the print. Should I have done something like their varnish? They have, Breathing Color has this thing they call the timeless varnish. Should I have done that first? Well, certainly I could have, but given the fact that I was going with a really a really subtle approach anyway. I viewed the varnish as an extra step that was not required. So I just really am pleased with how the results came out. And I just know that if I want a little more of that brushstroke coming through, I can leave a little more of it in my painting process, and then it will still diminish a little bit, but it'll be there even with more presence. All right, that's it for here in this studio. Back to my home studio where we're going to wrap things up. So welcome back to the studio, and if you'd like to get one of these prints, please take a look at my website. I've got the links in the show notes, the description there, and you can take a look at all of them. I still have prints from each of the series that I've been releasing, so 7 total now, and I guess 8 if you include the fact that there's 2 with this month. That's not going to happen every single time, but hey, it might happen more and more if the spirit moves. But anyway, so take a look at those links, and let's continue on and wrap this up just a little bit. I'd like to follow up with the announcements I made last time, because I just feel like for some reason I need to have some closure, some full circle, some whatever else, and whatever going on with that. After I recorded and released my latest episode for December, where I talked about this online course for designing creativity and photography, and I talked about a Christmas print giveaway, things unfortunately kind of got really, I don't want to necessarily say they fell apart, but things really got, well, like I told one person today, my schedule got tossed into a blender. And whether we want to call it some personal challenges or whatever else, there's a lot of ways that we could talk about it. The thing that I'm getting at is I had to really shift gears because so many things have gone south, and my ability to dedicate the time to those things evaporated. That's about all there is to it. So I don't want to cause anyone to cause, fear or anything along those lines, or whatever the case is. I just found myself having to pull back. And so, in a longer term sense of pulling back, I guess is what I mean too. So that's why I pulled back the idea, the offer as it were, for the design and creativity and photography course. And I just never followed up with pushing that Christmas print release as well. No one entered, no one sent anything in. So I guess I'm off the hook there, but I also didn't push it any further than, because that was recorded early in December. Anyway, without getting too much into the weeds, I just had to pull back, and that's all there is to it. I got nothing else to really say on that. So if you're all like, well, what happened to that? Or what happened to this? Why am I not hearing about these things? Because I told you about, we would make an announcement for who was the print winner and whatever else and things like that. But that's the reason why we're not hearing any more updates on those things, is because I just had to withdraw a little bit on those extracurricular activities. Let's end with a dose of inspiration as we do. So the inspiration for this print comes from Genesis 1, verses 2 through 5. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters, and God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And God saw that the light was good. And God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning, the first day. There's so much packed into this, and I think it really explains itself, so I'm not going to comment too terribly much on it. But I love this section here, separated the light from the darkness, called the light day, and the darkness he called night. This is before the sun, moon, and stars were created, so we have still a distinction of lightness and darkness. That's very interesting to me. And there was evening and there was morning the first day. And I think that's very interesting too, because in the Jewish tradition, when they were looking at their week, the day started at sunset. The observance of whatever that next day was, started at sunset. And so when they, in particular to what was important to them was the Sabbath, Friday night at sunset, that's when it started. And it went until sunset the following day. And we have that right in, that foundation of that understanding of how our week is formed and things like that. I mean, it is one of the first things we talk about when we're looking here in the book of Genesis. So that's just awesome. And then we have another quote here. We have a quote, I should say, by C.S. Lewis. Friendship is unnecessary. And initially when I read that, I was like, no. Where are you going, Mr. Lewis? But let's backtrack here. Friendship is unnecessary, like philosophy, like art. And again, I'm like, what? Okay, again, friendship is unnecessary, like philosophy, like art. It has no survival value. Rather, it is one of those things that give value to survival. Oh, that's beautiful. That's definitely art. I'm not much of a philosophy kind of guy, so there's that. But friendship, art, most definitely gives value to life, or as he put it, value to survival. And the opportunity to be creating, the opportunity to get out there and make some kind of commentary on creation, as it were, or to draw inspiration from those things and to create more value out of that. That's what photography, one of the things I should say that photography is about for me. And I'm pretty sure that's what it's about for you too. The reasons we go out and do these things, that gives value to life or value to survival. Very good stuff. Very good. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for listening and watching. It's always a thrill to talk about these things here with you. And I just invite you, share this with a friend, maybe put it on your social media, maybe put a link to the YouTube video or a link to your favorite podcast player episode on your social media. Do something to share it with someone else, especially if you think they're going to enjoy it. Send them a text message, send them an email message, whatever works for you, whatever the case is. I just invite you to do that. And thank you for doing that. That's just going to help spread this word, spread this idea to more people. And I think that's just going to be a good thing if we can do that. And I really do appreciate your help in doing so. All right. Until next time, God bless and happy shooting.